The topic we are going to discuss today, or the topics we will discuss today and in the next few classes, will be dimension reduction and various types of dimension reduction. So let's first start with a brief introduction to that, which you have already seen before, but let's just redo that a bit. That you remember, uh, we deal with very high dimensional data nowadays, used for product recommendation, where there are lots of products and lots of customers, and the job is to recommend products bought by similar customers. For online advertising also, there are lots of websites and huge number of customer actions. And for text search, or terms and documents, words and documents, there are so many documents and millions of terms. And of course, in image also, we have huge number of image features. In this portion, we will focus in the application. When you go to the application, we will mostly focus on the first and the third case. We will deal with applications based on product recommendation and some ideas about searching, information retrieval, applications in information retrieval, applications of dimension reduction in information retrieval. Okay, so the main problem is finding similar items. Of course, this is not the only problem. Some variation of this will be our problem. And the challenge is very high dimensional data, and most algorithms become computationally challenging or infeasible in very high dimension. So we remember this picture that if we draw, let's say a few points on one dimension, right? Then you see the green point has the red ones close to it, but the blue points are far apart, right? And so on. Now, what if you draw the same points in a higher dimension? Then what may happen is that some of the red points which were close to it are actually not close to the green points in the higher dimension. Well, this is just a 1D, 2D example. In actual real high dimensional cases, this sparsity of data will become much more prevalent. So the intuition is, this we discussed before also, when there is only one choice, all customers buy the same product. But when there are many choices, then different customers tend to differ in their choices. So this is how the data should be interpreted. So that's an issue with this. The other issue, of course, is computational challenge, right? Yes, so the sparseness tells us that most customers do not buy most products, so the data is very sparse, and so on. Most terms are not present in most documents, and most images don't contain most features, right? So these are the, this is the scenario for very sparse high dimensional data. Now, the key problem is we want to find similar items, and so there are two issues. One is the sparseness of the data, computational challenge. Another is, if the data is too sparse, even if we could compute similarities or distances between points in very high dimension, even if it was computationally possible, is it actually doing a good job, right? So that these are the main two challenges. Okay, so I went through this very fast because we have seen this before. Now coming to the main point is, why do we need to do dimension reduction, or what is the main approach? The main approach is we want to transform high dimensional data points to lower dimension. Okay, the condition is that distances between data points should be preserved. Well, it cannot be exactly preserved, so it should be somewhat preserved, right? And not only that, so this would give us a computational advantage, but not only that, we want to gain a few more things. We want to gain not only easier computation, but also we want to remove some noise due to data sparseness. So, I mean, I bought a biscuit, you also bought a biscuit, but somebody else uh, doesn't like biscuit at all. Like bought maybe bread. Okay, So I and you are similar, but the other person is actually not. But if we simply treat these three things as three different products, we are actually failing to capture the similarity that we could have captured in a lower dimension, right? So if we can collapse things to lower dimension with some distances being preserved, then we can actually capture better. Now, remember our linear algebra revision last time. Um, we talked about projecting. And we also talked about subspaces. So whatever we do here, we will actually project onto some subspaces, not trivial projection onto the original. Not a trivial projection onto some subset of the original axis. Okay, so we'll explain that in a moment more in more detail. So the techniques that we will cover in this course, one of them we have already seen, mean hashing, and then we'll see matrix factorization based technique, basically singular value decomposition, and CUR decomposition, and before that today we are going to see a slightly older but a very simple technique called random projection. The theory behind this is not simple, but the use is very simple. So that's why we call it simple. Okay. So, so what do we want? We want to preserve distance, and what happens is from a 2-dimension to 1-dimension, if we go, the distances may not always be preserved, right? So the pink one is close to this one, so that distance is kind of remaining close, but well, this was far apart, now it has already come here. On the other hand, this was not so far apart, but this is now farther than the blue point. So these 2 points were actually not close to each other, and these 2 points were relatively closer, but after projection to 1 dimension, if we simply do it in any way, we are not going to retain that property. So mapping from 1 dimension, higher dimension to lower dimension, of course, if 2 points are already close to each other, they will remain close. But if 2 points are far apart, then they may or may not remain far apart from each other. The question is, can we reduce dimensionality in a way so that the distances are preserved? Okay. So the Johnson, Linden, Strauss lemma, 1984, essentially says that yes, we can. Okay. I guess the motivation part is very clear. It has been talked about many times in previous classes also. So yeah, if you don't have any question as of now, let's just move to the lemma or random projection. So the lemma goes like the following. It's a pretty mathematical statement, so we'll go slowly and try to understand it. So intuitively, what it says is that a set of points in high dimensional space can be mapped to a much lower dimensional space so that the pairwise distance or pairwise distances between the points okay, are almost preserved. Almost means, well, we will see that it's actually quantified by some error, which is kind of guaranteed or bounded. So the lemma is like the following. Let X be a set of D points. So D is my number of points in Rn. So n dimensions, and this n is supposed to be large, and that is the only case where it's going to be interesting. So n is large, and let X be a set of D points in Rn. And then let there be two constants. One of them is a very small constant epsilon. Another is also a small constant delta, but the condition is just that it has to be less than half. And what would be our lower dimensions? We are sitting in Rn. Our lower dimension will be small r. So RR, right? Then, so if we have constants such that this R is greater than or equal to this quantity, 24 by 3 epsilon square minus 2 epsilon cube log of D. Now, epsilon is small. So 3 epsilon square minus 2 epsilon cube. Either way, so epsilon cube is even smaller, right? So 3 epsilon square minus 2 epsilon cube will be definitely a positive quantity, but a very small quantity, right? And Yeah, and D is my number of points. Well, of course, we are assuming we have a lot of points, right? If it is only 10 points, then we can do everything almost manually or straightforward way. So D is the log D. So R has to be greater than equal to 24 by a small number and log D. So R has to be, I mean, R is bounded below, so R has to be at least some, number. It cannot be too small, but we'll see that, well, it can be reasonably small so that it's useful. Then there exists a map, a linear transformation here, right? From Rn to Rr, n dimensional space to R dimensional space, small r dimensional space, such that for any 2 points in X, okay, for any 2 points in X, the original, this is the original distance, right? So this is xi minus xj, the norm of that square. Okay, so norm square, this is the original distance. Again, this is also the original distance, okay, in n dimension. And fxi minus fxj is the distance in the reduced dimension. So the distance in the reduced dimension will be more than 1 minus epsilon times the original distance and less than 1 plus epsilon times the original distance. Okay, with probability at least 1 minus delta. So delta was supposed to be less than half. I mean, if you can make delta much smaller, then this has a high probability. Okay, so lots of things going on here. So the thing the main part
Sir,
will, yes.
sorry, just one confusion. Where is delta in the equation? I mean, delta
Delta
or
is not in
constant?
the equation. Delta is in the probability, with probability at least 1
Okay,
minus.
with probability.
Yeah. So in fact, we will see that we will actually not bother about delta in the actual constructions. This is the original form of the lemma. Okay. So there are multiple people. Okay. So yeah, let's just wait for some time. We will come to those portions. Yes. So the first thing you might think is, yes, delta is not there. So why is delta required? Delta is just saying high probability. So we could actually just drop the delta from here and say with high probability, or intuitively you can think that, well, it's kind of sure. Okay. So intuitively you can think that it's kind of sure. Just a moment. I'll just a moment. Yeah. So right. So let's look at this equation very carefully. This is the distance after mapping. Suppose the distance before mapping was, let's say, 5. Okay, just let's say some number 5. And suppose my epsilon is, let's say, 0.1. So that 1 minus epsilon is 0.9 and 1 plus epsilon is 1.1. So then what it says is that if the original distance was 5, my new distance will be at least 90% of the original distance, but at most 110% of the original distance. Okay. So what it says is that, and this happens for any pair. So it's a global assertion for all pairwise distances of your data set. Okay. So yeah, with high probability, of course, which means that if the probability is, let's say, 90%, let's say if delta is also 0.1, then for 90% of the points, you're going to get this. So, that's the essential idea. Okay, so what is the relation between this epsilon, delta, and R? Obviously, smaller the epsilon. That means if you want the error to be, if you want the bound to be very tight or the error to be very low, obviously you cannot reduce it to a very small dimension. So the smaller the epsilon, larger the R needs to be. This is order of log D by epsilon square, because epsilon square will dominate here. So order of log D by epsilon square. So the smaller the epsilon, the larger the R needs to be. D obviously is set of D points and the size of the set X. So D is a constant here. Epsilon is what you can trade off, right? And this part says distances after mapping are distorted by at most a factor epsilon Okay, if epsilon is 10%, then you can at most distort the distance. I mean, you are guaranteed that the distance will be distorted by at most 10%. Okay, so this is the reference, original paper, Johnson and Linde-Strauss. So let's actually try to understand this a bit more intuitively and see how it works and how can we get such a random projection. So the lemma says there is a mapping. Okay, of course, the mapping is a projection, right? So it's a high dimension to low dimension. By projection, however, it does not mean that you are projecting onto just one of the axes, right? So let's say you have n axis, Rn, n axis, the canonical basis. No, it doesn't mean that you can just project onto, let's say, R dimension, I mean, R of the axis, and then you can get that. No, that doesn't work, right? So here you have 2 dimension. If we simply project onto 1 dimension, this doesn't work. We have already seen that. But maybe this one will work, or maybe this one will work. So let's actually try to look at it. So here, if we project onto this line, then yeah, it looks like things are kind of okay. These two are close, so these two will become here. But no, these two are far apart, so doesn't look very good, right? Maybe this one works better. Yeah, these two were already close, so they will kind of collapse on here. These two are also not so far apart. So, you know, something like this might happen. But anyway, the lemma is not to be used for 2-dimensional 1 dimension, because we'll see later that R cannot be as small as 1 or 2 or something like that in any case. So this picture is not going to give you the intuition, but it's just to give you the intuition that not any projection would work. Some projection would work. And then the question is okay, okay, so then the question is this lemma just an existential statement that, well, there is some map but we cannot find it, or can we actually find or construct a map so that it helps us computationally? I mean, if we have to work with data and if we have to use a random projection with these properties, we actually have to concretely project them to a smaller dimension, right? So we cannot just say, yeah, we can, but we don't know how to. So the goal then is, goal of a random projection is d-dimensional data points are mapped to R dimension, where R has to be much, much smaller than D by a linear transformation, which means it will be a multiplication by an R cross D matrix, right? So you had vectors which were like D cross 1, and you're going to make them R cross 1. So it will be a multiplication by an R cross D matrix. A matrix S, which will satisfy these conditions, right? So that Johnson Linde-Strauss condition with that bound, okay, distance bound, is called a JL transform. So a matrix S, which will be of R cross D size or dimension, which will actually do this for us, is called a JL transform. Now, one question you might think of asking, why do we call this a random projection? Because we will see that we will actually see a few examples of such matrix S, and they are essentially generated randomly, but with certain conditions. So with certain restrictions, they are actually random matrices. So you can say they are generated randomly from a certain distribution. So that's why they are random projections. Okay, any question as of now? Obviously, we haven't seen the concrete matrices, but other than that, any question as of now? Okay, so let's move on. So random projection techniques, since we are just going to use this for our application purpose, and we need to understand how these constructions, different kind of constructions work, it will actually be quick for us to see. But the techniques are like the following. So our setup is, we have X, a set of D points in Rn. We have a small error bound epsilon, which is like up to us. We may want the error bound to be very small. So it's something that we choose based on certain trade-offs, and high probability. R needs to be much smaller than our dimension. So S needs to be of the form R cross N. Matrix S, which is the AJL transform matrix, has to be of the dimension R cross N. So Johnson and Lindstrauss, of course, provided one such matrix. Okay, so in 1984, they proved that if we set S to be root over n by r times P, where P is an orthogonal projection matrix of this dimension. So P is just an orthogonal projection matrix of dimension R cross N, and R is order of some 1 by epsilon square log D, which we already saw in the lemma, then, then we do have that property. Okay, now this might sound an odd thing. What does it mean? Well, we did not discuss orthogonal matrices in the last class. You all know what is an orthogonal matrix. So orthogonal matrix is a matrix where all the columns are orthogonal to each other and the columns also have norm 1. So our canonical basis is an orthogonal matrix. The identity matrix is the most trivial orthogonal matrix. But I mean, any other matrix where the columns are norm 1 and they are orthogonal to each other, that means their pairwise dot products are 0. That's an orthogonal projection, orthogonal matrix. Well, so what does this mean? It means that we are going to use an orthogonal projection matrix. It will look like projecting onto a trivial R dimensional subspace, but with some rotation. Okay, so with some rotation, any orthogonal matrix is actually a rotation of our canonical basis. So with some rotation. Now, why is it random? Because you can randomly assign your first orthogonal column or first vector, then, and of course you can normalize it to norm 1, and then you can construct the next one. Again, there are some random factors there. You can randomly choose what would be. So, you can go on and doing this. Obviously, the last vector will be automatically determined. So once your all vectors are orthogonal, the last vector has to be automatically determined, modulo a factor of -1, 1 or -1. So you don't have freedom there. But before that, you actually have freedom on how to construct an orthogonal projection matrix. There can be infinitely many of them, right? But which one is like a random choice. So it's a random orthogonal projection matrix. And there is another factor here. The thing is, you need to multiply that with a root over n by r. What is root over n by r? It's a large number, right? N is much larger than r. So root over n by r is large. Okay. So now, does anybody have an idea why do we need this? I mean, if we simply project with an orthogonal projection matrix, we're going to get a projection. Where are we simply scaling it? We are simply multiplying all entries by this number. Right, n by r is just a scalar. The root over n by r is just a scalar. Where are you multiplying this just by a number? Anybody? Okay, let me give you a clue. Typically, what happens if you have a 3-dimensional space, you have points there, you project it onto 2-dimensional space. Points come close to each other. If you are still taking the Euclidean distance, your distances will reduce. And even if you are, even if the relative distances remain the same, the absolute distances will reduce, right? If you are reducing dimension, you are actually bringing them close to each other, right? So if you simply take an orthogonal projection matrix and project, all your pairwise distances will go down. Well, it's a good thing maybe that, if A was closer to B than C, then it will remain so. But the statement of the lemma said, well, the original distance will only be distorted by at most like a epsilon% or something like that, a factor of epsilon. So just to preserve that, essentially what this says is that, well, you project onto an orthogonal projection matrix and just scale it up, all entries, scale it up so that the distances come back to the original scale. Okay, I mean, For practical purposes, this is not required because we will only be interested in relative distances between points. We don't really care exactly what is the distance, but this is essentially just a scaling factor. That's just to tell you. So then there was another one, Gaussian random projection matrix. This is by Indyk and Motowani, the famous Rajiv Motowani, 1998, that orthogonality is not essential. Okay, so they actually proved that orthogonality is not essential, and they constructed S equal to 1 by root over R times P, where entries of P are drawn independently from a standard normal distribution N, 0, 1. Now, what does that mean is, to get an orthogonal projection matrix, even if it is random, you have a lot of conditions. You actually have conditions like the first column you can choose randomly, then normalize. But then based on the first column, the second column has to be orthogonal to it. The third column has to be orthogonal to both of the previous, and so on, right? So constructing such a matrix is computationally harder. However, if you simply draw numbers from normal distribution, then you don't have to bother about those conditions. So essentially P, all entries of P, so if P is an R cross N matrix, all Rn entries of P are drawn from standard normal distribution. Well, they had to sacrifice a bit in R though. Okay, what happened here? R has to be larger, a bit larger, order of 1 by epsilon square log now d by delta. Okay, so then R has to be a bit larger. What does this mean? Well, delta equal to 1 is not enough, right? If delta equal to 1, you can do this with probability 1 minus delta, that means probability 0. You don't get anything. If you want delta to be, let's say, a very small, 0.5 or something, that means you want a 95% guarantee, then your D log this, I mean, then it's basically log D by 0.5, sorry, 0.05, right? So if you want a 5% error or 95% guarantee, that means D by 0.05, that means 20 times delta. So then you have log some factor times D. So that's where you sacrifice by that's what you sacrifice by removing the orthogonal condition, but you get a lot of computational advantage. Okay, so these are two constructions. So both, as you see, both are random matrices with certain conditions. So this is a random. This looks much more random than this, but this is random drawn from normal distribution, and this is random, but provided that you make sure the matrix is orthogonal. Any question as of now? So intuitively, I'll be a bit surprised if you don't have a problem here, because for the first time when you hear this, it's going to strike you a bit, but actually what is happening, right? So anyway, if you don't have a question, that might mean that you need to understand a bit more to actually pose questions. Let's then go on. Then in 2003, so just a moment here, that this is an orthogonal projection matrix, not a sparse matrix, a dense matrix, right? So even though R is small, N is large, and R cross N, that's a dense matrix. Orthogonal matrices, except the identity, they are not really sparse. And here also you are drawing random numbers from the normal distribution. They are also real numbers. They are not really 1-0 numbers, right? So this is also a dense matrix. Now, can we get a sparse matrix? Our original data is sparse, right? Original data is sparse. All my vectors are sparse. If we want to project them with a dense matrix, then we are going to get dense vectors. Can we actually do it with a sparse matrix? So Aklioptas in 2003 constructed this matrix. Okay, the matrix S is constructed as Sij, every ijth entry, any entry of this R cross N matrix, it is -1 with probability 1 by 6, 0 with probability 2 by 3, and 1 with probability 1 by 6. That means with probability 2 by 3, it is a 0, and the rest, 50% of the time, or with probability half, it is -1, or probability half, it is +1. The great part about this is here the entries are all integers. Okay, so either 0 or 1 or -1. And that means if you have your data in a database, right, then you actually don't need to multiply at all, right? So you either choose, if it is 0, you discard, if it is 1, you keep, if it is -1, you simply reverse the sign, right? So it's a very database friendly. You can actually write SQL kind of queries to do this. And it's lots parser, way faster to multiply with this kind of S than a dense S. Okay, so these three are the most well-known JL constructs. So by JL construct, we mean it's a construction of a matrix with the Johnson-Lindenstrauss property, that if we multiply our vectors or our data with this matrix, we're going to go to a low dimension with the property that we wanted. Okay.
Sir, can you please explain the second point? How is it lot sparser? Like,
yeah. So how does this matrix look actually? So let's actually try to write one such matrix, right? Okay. So let's say I'm going to write, let's say R cross n, right? So let's say I'm going to write a 3. Okay. So let's say 2 cross, and this is a lot. So with probability 2 by 3 is going to be a 0, and so 2 of them, and maybe 2 of them are 0, and then there will be a 1, and then again there will be another 0, and then maybe a -1, and then there will be so many zeros, and then there will be a -1, and like this, right? So our matrix is going to be something like this. Again, maybe
this matrix is 2 cross.
Whatever, this is 2 cross something, I don't know, maybe 2 cross 10.
Okay.
Okay, so this side is your larger side, right? N, R cross n. So what I want is I want an R cross n. So I want an R cross n, right? Now I'm just going to multiply all my vectors with this kind of a matrix. Now, this matrix is much sparser than a dense matrix. It's like a two-third of the entries are 0. So
okay.
essentially you reduce computation by at least 2/3.
Okay.
And even otherwise, your entries are only 1 and -1.
Okay.
So you don't really multiply with anything, right? If it is 1, you simply keep that. If it is -1, you reverse the sign. So if you are actually, I mean, for Python, it will probably not matter so much, but if you actually use, let's say, a database, okay, you are essentially just writing select queries where in some cases you will have a select, you will join. If it is 0, you will simply discard or something like that, right? So you can actually simulate this multiplication with this matrix using a database query, and the computation will be way faster. Okay, so that is the whole idea behind this. Okay, got it, so more or less?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So now, but I do think that this will require more discussion once you actually go back and read the slides, all of you. And so in the doubt clearing session tomorrow or on Monday, whichever we'll decide, we should actually discuss it again. But then before that, carefully read this, understand this, and then you will have more concrete doubts. Okay, so then you will actually be able to appreciate it better.
Sir,
yes.
So will we be seeing why this works, or we'll take it as a working theory?
Oh, no. So so the proof is actually a very long, proofs are very long linear algebra proofs. Now, yeah, so we're not going to get into that. In each of them, the references are here. You can try to read, and if some of you are very interested, I can also read it again and try to discuss with you separately. Okay, so all the three constructions, the 3 references are here. Okay, sorry, yeah, the Johnson-Lindenstrauss, I have already given the reference before. This is Indik and Motowani, this paper, and this is this paper. Okay. All right, but
yes,
we have actually more to understand here. Okay, so it's just that this works is not enough. how do we use it? So let's actually get to that, and we'll actually also do an hands-on to actually run this thing. Okay, so what happens is, so this is actually from scikit-learn. Their random projection is implemented with different kinds of all these different kinds of things: sparse, random, and Gaussian, at least. So look at the formula. For if you go back and look at the formula, what you will see is that your I mean, and the goal is we want to reduce the dimension. The more we can reduce, the better, because that is going to be good for us. And we want to have a low epsilon. These are our goals. But obviously we cannot get anything that we want about R and D, right? So we cannot get R equal to 10 and epsilon equal to 0.0001. So what can we get? The funny point is, it does not matter on the original number of dimensions, n. If you remember the statements, nowhere we mention n, the original number of dimensions. Yes, we mention the number of points d. So it depends on your number of points, but not your original dimension. Okay, so that's one amazing but unusual but a very good thing, because if you could do this from dimension 1 million, you can also do this from dimension 1 billion, no problem. Same thing will work. So what is it actually? The more data, that means d is larger. That means you need to ensure that for each pair, the distances are preserved, right? So obviously for each d square pairwise distances, that has to be preserved, which means we need a stronger condition, which means we cannot actually, I mean, intuitively, we see that we cannot actually project to a much smaller dimension. Also, it will be clear from the formulas. So this graph, or the set of plots, actually, the number of observations to be epsilon embed, that means the number of points in our data. If it is 10, and this is the minimum number of dimensions we can work with, that means our R, okay, the smaller dimension that we want to project to. So yeah, if it is 10, forget about it. But as soon as it goes to 100, well, you cannot really do much. You also have to project onto 100 dimension. But what about this? I mean, even if you have, let's say, 1 million data points, then with it's a log scale, right? So with maybe around I don't know, 400 dimension or so, you can actually get okay, so this is not a good thing. Epsilon equal to 1.0 is not a good thing. Let's say epsilon equal to 0.5. So epsilon equal to 0.5 is here. So around, or epsilon equal to 0.3 is here. So around 1000 dimension is good enough to give you 70% distance preserving transformation. If you want a 90% distance preserving transformation, then you want to go to 10,000 dimension. So even if your original dimension is 1 million or 10 million or something, you can reduce it to 10,000 dimension, and then your pairwise, all pairwise distances, okay? Sorry, not original dimension. Yeah, original dimension can be anything high, but even if you have 1 million data points, you can go to 10,000 dimension, and your all pairwise distances will be 90% preserved. And if it goes to like 10 to the power 9, then also it doesn't go really much farther than 10 to the power 4, right? I mean, this much is on order of magnitude. So 10 to the power 5 would have been here. So it's almost like 10 to the power 4 only. So even if you have 1 billion data points, you can actually project it onto a, let's say, 20,000 dimensional space, and you can preserve the distance fairly well. Okay, so that's one part, because the original dimension in does not matter. The second thing, well, if you want epsilon to be very small, obviously you have to increase, you have to trade off your R, right? So obviously if your epsilon has to be close to 0, then, well, you cannot really do much. But as soon as you allow epsilon to be around 10% or so, okay, so 90% distance preserved, then you can actually do pretty well. Okay, so these are the main 2 points that we want to note about random projection. Okay. Please do read the slides, and please, if you want to read the papers also. I have tried to compile this in a simple way, reading several materials so that it is easy to understand. But yeah, if if some of you want to actually read up the proof, you also read, I will also do that. And then we'll discuss, we'll try to figure out, well, can we understand all the details of some of the proofs? All right, so any question immediately now, or I will actually move on to the hands-on. So we'll actually run random projection on some data and see what kind of thing we get.
So, sir, this graphs, what it says is that if you want to lesser the error bound, then we need to move to the higher dimension. The previous graph also says that, right? For 1 billion points, and if we have a number of dimension is 10,000, then the distance preserved is 0.9.
Yeah, so here we have only 5 different errors, and we see keeping the error fixed. As the number of observations increase, that means number of data points increase, what do we need in R? So this is like for each of the plots, keeping the error fixed. If my number of points increase, then what do we need? And the next one is, well, the number of samples fixed. For each case, our number of samples fixed. If we want to reduce or increase or trade off the error, then how should R vary? Well, it's just, I mean, how should R vary with respect to the error and the number of samples? But we are drawing it in 2 different planes.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, here keeping the error fixed is similar like we are preserving the variance of the data points. Is it similar to that?
Okay, keeping the error fixed means yes, somewhat, right? Because if the data points were close, so intuitively, what does variance mean? Variance of a transformation in this case would be if your data points were close, then in your after transforming, they shouldn't really vary too much, right? So yeah, if you keep the error small, that means the variance is small. Okay, all right.
Okay.
So now let's actually move to the hands-on that we have. Just a moment. Yes. Okay, can you see my notebook?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, fine. So what we will do, obviously movie recommendation and all those things, we will look at it a bit more in detail later. We also need to understand the social aspects of it and how should it work and all those things. But right now we'll simply take one such data and we'll look at it mathematically. Are we preserving the distance kind of a thing? And later on we'll actually try to get into the application more clearly when we do singular decomposition and so on. So what we want to do is this is the movie lens data set. So if you want, you can actually download the data set. It's available from this link. Okay, so there is a there is a movie lens small and a movie lens original. I think this is the original thing that I'm going to work with because I need large amount of data. I mean, somewhat large amount of data. Otherwise, it will not make sense. Okay, so sorry. Yeah. Okay. So what we are going to do? So the data set looks like this. It's a CSV file with these 4 columns: user ID, movie ID, rating, and timestamp. The first line is a header. The timestamps are useful, but in this case, we are not going to bother about it. So what we have: user ID, movie ID, rating. So essentially, it's a matrix. User ID is one side, movie ID is another side, and rating is the value, right? So rows, columns, and values. Okay. So with Panda, I read this. I mean, hopefully you know this. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. This is just reading a CSV file. So and let's see how does it look. So I'm just So it looks something like this. The first one is probably the sequence number. Doesn't matter. This is the sequence from this data frame. This is the data. Okay. Ignore the first column. The data is this: user ID, movie ID, rating, and then some timestamp. Okay. So every user ID. Not every. Okay. If the user has rated a movie, then we have user ID, movie ID, rating. So it's a sparse matrix. There are 2 27 million rows. Okay, so 27 million rows means there are 27 million non-zero entries in the matrix. Okay, so 27, no, nearly 28 million rows. Okay,
Sir, why it is a sparse matrix?
because not every user has rated every movie.
Okay, means the number of movies are very greater.
Not greater than this. We'll see the number of movies in a while. Just a moment. Okay, so what we want is we actually want to create a sparse matrix out of this. Instead of getting this into an NP array, normal NumPy array, we'll actually use the sparse matrix library. And I mean, if you have used it before, it's fine. Otherwise, just this is how you do it. Okay, so this users is movies, and then you are actually passing. And I'm doing a movies -1, users -1, because my indices here start from 1, and I want the indices to start from 0. Okay, that's all. User ID and movie ID, I want to start from 0. So what we have is we have so many items or so many movies. So we have around 200,000 movies and around 300,000 users. This is loaded in the form that your movies are rows and users are columns. But when we think about this, we think that the users are rows. So just a swap in your thinking you have to do every time you are actually thinking conceptually and doing it here. So to answer your question, Deepen, if it was not sparse, it would have had around 200,000 times 200,000 entries, right? But you don't have so many. So that would have been, I don't know, just calculate 10 to the power whatever. So, but it's a sparse matrix. Okay, so first thing we do, I think we are almost out of time, but maybe 5 more minutes, and then I'll share the notebook with you. It's very easy. The first thing we do is we saw the graphs, right? We saw the graph. What is the best dimension we can get if we want our error to be this much, right? So that is what we are doing first. So we are importing from scikit-learn Johnson Lindenstrauss minimum dimension, okay, and importing random projection, okay, for epsilon to be all these possible values. So 0.1 to 0.4 with a gap of 0.05. What is the minimum dimension that JL transformation can give me, right? Okay, so this is n samples equal to r dot shape 1. So the first thing, that is these many no, sorry, r dot shape 1 is this. So these are my dimensions, because when I project, I am not projecting users, I am projecting movies. So my movies are vectors in the user space, but I am actually projecting onto a lower dimensional space. If we do the opposite, if we make user profiles, then we can take the users as vectors, column vectors, and movies as dimensions. Okay, so here what we get is our original dimension was around 300,000. If we want epsilon to be 0.1, then we have to have 10,700, around 10,000 dimensions. If we are happy with the 0.15, then we can go to around 5,000 dimensions. And if we are happy with the 40% distortion, then we can even go to like a 900, 855 dimensions. Okay, so let's actually perform one of those dimensions, or sorry, one of those transformations. So there are, I mean, quite a few of them. Now a Gaussian random projection, which is same thing, random projection, instead of sparse, you can write Gaussian here. For this data will be hard to compute on my laptop. Okay, so you see already, right? It's a multiplication with a dense matrix. So it will then be a 10,000 times 200,000 matrix, and that itself is a huge dense matrix. Well, it will actually probably exhaust my RAM. I mean, it will exhaust my RAM pretty easily. So, and that's not a sparse matrix. So, but if we use the sparse random projection, which is given by the Aklioptas paper, then we can actually do it. So let's do that. I mean, obviously, you can use a smaller data. So there is this ML latest or ML small from the movie lens data. If you download that, you can play with your Gaussian random projection also. So transformer equal to random projection, sparse random projection, epsilon equal to 0.1, and let's do fit transform. Okay, so fit transform, and then let's see what happens. It's actually working. It's taking some time, but well, at least it's feasible with the whole movie lens data. Yeah, it's done. So now our shape has become these many movies, but only 10,435. Now remember that the estimate that we got was 10,760, but given this data, it could actually do for 10,004 for 435. So this means these estimates are kind of, order of. So you remember order of. So all the formulas in the proof or projection, all in the statements were kind of order of. So there are some um, room for improvement or a little bit of deviation there. But we are now down to, from 283,000 dimension, we are down to 10,000 dimensions. Now we should test effectiveness. Have we actually preserved the distances, right? So let's just do that. This is not actually recommending movies. It's just mathematical test. We test the effectiveness of random projection by computing similarity of items in the original dimension as well as in the reduced dimension. So we first select some random pairs. So let's say 2000 random pairs. Okay, so 2000 random pairs of movies, right? So 2000 random pairs of movies, and they are like this. Okay, these are movie IDs. Okay, now let's define a distance measure. So the distance measure is norm of the distance. Okay, norm of their one minus another. Okay, and if we simply actually do this, I mean, I'll quickly go through this. So it's just testing that this is the norm. Okay, the distance in the original dimension. Let's just do that. Okay, took three seconds, and in the reduced dimension, obviously, it took much lesser time. What is the error? So the error is mean absolute epsilon. That means the mean error is 0.04. However, there are some cases where the error is 0.3. So what did we want? We wanted to transform with epsilon equal to 0.1 with high probability, right? That means for most of the pairs of items, your distance will not be more than 0.1. I mean, will not be distorted by more than 0.1, or the error will not be more than 0.1. So yeah, fine. So the mean is very small. The maximum is this. You can actually, compute variance and many other things from this and try to figure out what happens. All right. So this is basically, well, it's a very easy code, right? So you can, this 3 lines of code or 2 lines of code for you to use in case you are happy with this much error and you want a very fast dimension reduction option with some probabilistic error being here and there. All right, any question immediately?
Sir, just I just wanted to confirm with those graphs. So if we want an error of 0.1, then the dimension, then we need the minimum number of dimension goes up by 10,000. I think 10,760. But
yeah,
if
like around, yeah, right. That is for these many items. Okay, I have these many items. Yeah, that is for these many items. If your number of items increase, this will also increase, but not so much. So as we saw in the graph, we can increase the number of items to 1 million, then 10 million, and then even 1 billion. Then also you will kind of be able to use maybe 20,000 dimension.
20,000 dimension.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's actually try that. I mean, if we just change this line, this has nothing to do with the data, right? We can simply change this line, and instead of this, let's write a billion, right? So this is the easy way to write a billion. So then you see, even if you have a billion points, you can go to around 17,000 dimensions. So 20 is just what I kind of saw from guess. Yeah, around 17,000 dimensions, and still you can get a very pretty good error.
And if the error is 0.4, then then we can settle for a lesser dimension of 14,
Yes, right.
1400.
That's right. So that's the trade-off, right? I mean, if you're happy with a higher error, you can reduce much more. So obviously, if you reduce too much, your error will be high. So you have to, you have to figure out what can you do computationally. Can you handle 17,000 dimensions? If yes, stay with a error which is a good one. If you cannot, then go to a 5,000 dimension maybe, and then say that okay, fine, I'm happy with 20% error.
Okay, sir.
Okay, all right then. Yeah, anybody
Sir, I
else?
have a confusion in
yes,
the sparse thing. I mean, when you transform it into sparse, where is the other columns goes? I didn't understand that.
Which place? Here?
Yes, yes, yes.
Here, right? Before not the transformation. I mean, from the data to a sparse matrix.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. See, the sparse matrix essentially is stored in, you remember the MapReduce thing we did, right?
Yeah.
The ij value. Now, suppose you have a 1 million cross 1 million matrix. So that means 10 to the power 12 entries. 1 million times 1 million. So 10 to the power 12 entries, right? So too big. But let's say only 100 of the entries are 1. So how much space do you need to store that? You only need to store the I of the row and j of the column and the value for these 100 entries. Everything else is 0. So this is what the sparse matrix library does. Okay, or any sparse matrix storing mechanism does. Okay, essentially it is like a CSV file, and this is essentially that only. The data originally came like this: row number, column number, value, row number, column number, value. Right.
Okay, I get it.
Right. So this is, so what we are doing from Panda, we're actually just using a Python library to store it in the same way. Okay. So if you are interested, you can actually look at, there are two kinds of CSR matrix and there is another sparse matrix. One of them is good for, so, okay, now how do you store, right? Do you store it sorted by the first one or the sorted by second one? So this is like sorted by rows, or maybe sorted by rows. And if you do the opposite, then you start with movie ID 1 and then movie ID 2, right? So which way do you keep it sorted? Depending on that, it will help you to multiply. I mean, depending on whether you want to do left multiplication or right multiplication, your the ordering will help you, right? So there is another kind of storage in the same library, CSR matrix. I forgot the other name. It is similar. So depending on that, you can actually choose the kind of the way you want to actually store the sparse matrix.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, that value of R, that depends on, you said, the number of data items, right? Not the dimensions.
Right.
Like,
Not the dimension, not the original dimension.
So in the previous cell where we are calculating that required value of R for a desired
Right.
epsilon.
Right.
So why are we passing this R dot shape 1 as the one of the parameters? Shape 1 will give us the dimension, right? Shape 0 will give us the items.
Oh, you are right. Maybe I made a mistake here. So here, right. So I think right. That's true. Yeah. Okay. Right. So then you actually, so this is very good. Thank you. So we actually get 10,435 then. Yeah, that was my mistake. You see, you actually, when you transform, you go to 10,435. Right. So this is exactly what it is. Yes, it should be R dot shape 0. I'm sorry. You're right. Yeah. So actually, this, when I did this, thinking in the mind, rows and columns, interchanging happens. So this is what happened. So this is very good. So everything then falls in place. We actually have so many items, and for so many items, 10,435 is what we need. Okay. Anything else? Let me actually put a point. Yeah, okay. So that's it then. So I'll share the notebook, the slides. If you want this data, you have to download it from the source website, right? I mean, yeah, it's not good to host the data sets when the public data set is hosted somewhere by the original source. It's not good to host it somewhere. So yeah, I have just I have given it a pointer to this website. You can just go to the website and download this data, and then you can use this ml latest ratings.csv to run the same. You can obviously run experiment with other data sets as well.
Sir,
All right. So then thank you all. Yes.
So when you gave a pointer to that page, did the page rank of that page increase just now? I mean, after giving a pointer.
Well, only if only if our course website is also, yes, it does, right? But as you remember, the how much does it increase? That depends on the page rank of the page that is pointing to. So our course website is a very new site, and not many people would be pointing to it. So it's a very minor increase. I mean, Movie Lens dataset is very famous, so I'm sure there are lots of links to that dataset anyway. But yes, I mean, theoretically it does.
So tomorrow will be the doubt clearing class. Or?
Oh yes, let's discuss that. Tomorrow, is it okay for everybody? 2:15?
Sir, it's better to keep it on Monday, sir. Sir, we need to go through these algorithms.
I agree. Is Monday okay with everyone?
Yes.
Okay, then let's do it on Monday. Then we'll also cover another topic tomorrow. So then let's do that on Monday.
But not tomorrow, sir, Saturday. Tomorrow is Friday.
Tomorrow is Friday, right? So Saturday we'll have another class as usual. So Monday we'll have the doubt clearing session.
Okay, sir.
All right.